So, ma'am, let's start with the basics for our listeners. What exactly are urban heat islands and why do they matter in the Indian urban context today?
Urban heat island, as the name suggests, is basically a pocket of higher temperature than the ambient temperature in an urban settlement. This has been around. I mean, this phenomenon has been around for a long time. We also experience this that when we are traveling in a highly congested city environment, we find that the temperature is slightly higher. When we get out of the city, then the temperature drops down. Now, what has happened is because of climate change in the entire Indian subcontinent, we are seeing more intense heat waves during summer season. Earlier, heat waves again was a common phenomenon in northern India, but not so much in southern part of India. But now in summer, almost the entire country has heat waves. And earlier, the heat waves used to last for a day or two. Now they last for weeks, sometimes even months. In general, the temperature around at that point in time is above 40 degrees centigrade, which is uncomfortable enough. And then in certain pockets inside the city, the temperature goes to 42 degrees, 43 degrees, which becomes even more unbearable. So that is the heat island. And it has become important now because of climate change in the Indian context.
Okay. And we often hear that unplanned urban growth is the root cause of urban heat islands. So, can you tell us a little bit about how concrete, concrete surfaces or deforestation and traffic density affect local heat pockets?
Yeah. So, as I said, since cities have started growing, we have generally, I mean, cities are built of concrete. We have high rise buildings, we have roads, we have other infrastructure. So, in general, there is higher density of concrete structures in an urban environment. In addition to that, there is more traffic. So, the exhaust from the vehicles also is releasing heat. The friction of the tires with the roads is also releasing heat. Concrete absorbs heat from the ambient and retains it, and then it will slowly keep on releasing that heat during night time once the sun goes down. But because of that, what happens is that in that pocket the temperature remains higher than the average temperature in the surrounding area because of this heat that is continuously being released. In a way, concrete is the main reason, but vehicles also add to this. And what is happening increasingly is that we are sort of, as the cities are expanding, at the outskirts of the cities where there used to be natural ecosystems, there used to be farms, which was basically greenery, which was keeping the area cool. In those areas now we are removing that green sort of cover and replacing that with concrete. So that has started retaining the heat, and new plants are not being like planted even around the so in the old days, if you look at the older parts of the city, there used to be small settlements and there used to be some trees planted around and so on. But that is no longer happening. People do some strange lawns and just some ornamental plants and something like that, not really big trees. So you are replacing green cover with concrete cover, and there is nothing to remove that heat. So the newly developed areas of cities are typically seeing this effect more prominently than the older parts of the city, which still have a lot of greenery.
Okay. And how do urban heat islands affect those who are living in informal settlements
Hmm.
or low income housing differently from affluent neighborhoods?
So this is actually a very important point around urban heat islands, that the affluent people who are spending most of their day inside buildings, either they are not working, or even if they are working in an office setting. there you have ways and means of controlling the inside temperature. You have fans, you have coolers, you have air conditioners. So you don't feel so much the impact of that increased temperature outside. But there is a large number of people who have to be out in the sun, even in summer season, even in the middle of a heat wave. These would be street hawkers. These are people working on the road, construction workers, waste collectors, police force, traffic police basically. So all of these people are out there right under the sun, and they are also more in numbers in the areas where there are more things happening. Dense concrete infrastructure is there. And low income urban citizens who are living in makeshift housing, where they do not have the ways and means of keeping their dwelling at a lower temperature. So all of these people are always going to suffer the most because of this heat island effect. Also, what happens is that inside these concrete buildings, when people are running their air conditioners, those air conditioners are throwing heat outside. So in the process of keeping us cool, we are adding to the heat island effect, which is going to have a bigger impact for those people who have to be out there. They don't have any other choice.
Okay. And ma'am, from a justice perspective, what do we risk ignoring if we don't account for the uneven impacts in our urban planning?
So that itself makes it a justice issue. That I mean, if you think about climate change in general, which has sort of intensified this urban heat island effect. Climate change is caused by use of energy, particularly petroleum and coal based energy. Now, who is using energy more? It is the affluent section of the society which is using more energy. So, in a way, it's the affluent people who are causing climate change, but who is suffering the impacts. In the context of heat island effect, it is the people who are low income. So these are the people who have not contributed to climate change at all, but they are suffering the impact. So that makes it a climate justice issue. And in a way, it also puts the higher moral responsibility on the affluent people in urban areas to try and address and solve this problem.
All right. Where do you think that Indian urban policy is currently falling short in tackling urban heat and climate change?
So it's not so much that the policies are falling short. I mean, and it's a sort of a universal problem in all sectors, that we have very good policies, but when it comes to implementation, that is where we are failing. Also, particularly in the case of urban areas, which are growing very rapidly, there is migration happening, and new construction is happening everywhere. This has also gone beyond policies. So what has happened is there is a sort of a unholy nexus of land mafia. Politicians and bureaucrats are also unfortunately part of this. So the land prices are so high in an urban setting, that it's that greed for money which pushes more and more concretization. So we do have urban planners learn all these things in their courses, that there has to be a green area when you are building. Around that, you should also have some open space, green space, and so on. But they never get to implement that, because the greed is so much that every inch has to be built and sold. And if it is a high rise building, it's the same piece of land being sold again and again. So it's that money that is driving the whole process of urban planning and urban development, and the policies sort of fall to the sidelines in that case. So that's the big problem.
All right. Are there any good examples of any Indian cities or community-based initiatives that are taking tangible steps to address urban heat and tackle sort of heating cities?
There are small sort of pockets where some good things are happening. So, even in Pune city itself, there are some responsible construction companies which are consciously choosing not to use or minimize the use of concrete. So that even though they are constructing it, it is not contributing so much to heat island effect. There are people who are consciously choosing to walk or cycle or use public transport, so that their contribution to both urban pollution as well as this heat island effect is reduced. So responsible behavior on part of citizens or community groups, there are several such examples. There are some examples of better designed buildings, so that you make the most of the space available with minimum materials being used for construction. You can design smartly, also make use of natural ventilation, natural lighting, so that the energy use is reduced and you don't have to spend and you don't have to run air conditioners for example, to keep the inside temperature low. So there are these small pockets of best practices, but unfortunately it's not reflecting in the general urban planning as such, because it's not only about building buildings, it's also about roads, flyovers, other infrastructure that is being constructed in the cities. All of that is also concrete, so that is also adding to the heat island effect. And every new piece of infrastructure that gets created, that adds to the problem.
Yes. And ma'am, according to you, what kind of public engagement or education is the most urgent right now when it comes to urban sustainability?
So in a way, I mean, in a democratic setup, uh, the political leaders are not really leaders, they are followers of public opinion. So if people demand sustainable cities, they will get sustainable cities. Right now our aspirations are misguided in a sense. So everybody wants fancy looking infrastructure everywhere. So in Pune, for example, if you take I mean, in the context of urban heat island effect itself, Pune city in a way is fortunate that we already have natural means of reducing the impact of this urban heat island. We have hills and we have rivers flowing through the city. Now, if the hills and rivers are maintained in their natural form, especially along the riverside, if there is a natural riparian ecosystem, all this green cover will absorb heat and keep it down, so that there is a sort of a counter effect to the heat island effect. But that is not happening. I mean, what happens is that there is a large number of people who want a concrete jogging track and promenade along the river bank, or they want to build flyovers around, on the hills to reduce traffic congestion. So uh, people are also misguided in their priorities. So I think there is a need for educating citizens. A few years back, we did an exercise. What we did is, this was actually a project by my colleague Purnima Agarkar. So we held sort of meetings with citizen groups, with college students, in which we talked about SDG 11, the 11th Sustainable Development Goal, which is about sustainable communities and cities. So we gave some input to people about what is involved in sustainable SDG 11. What are the 6-7 criteria of SDG 11? And then we asked people to compare what they see around themselves in Pune city, where we stand in relation to those 7 things which are part of SDG 11. And then on that basis, we asked people to sort of create create an ask that what do you want to see in Pune city if the city is to become sustainable, and that created a citizens manifesto for a sustainable Pune city. So I think these type of exercises where you don't just go and casually ask people what do you want. You have to first have a conversation about what exactly does it mean. Does it mean to have a sustainable city? What is the sustainability aspect of it? And then ask people to introspect on what our aspirations are, what do we see around ourselves, and where do we want to go. People will logically choose the sustainability path if they have this full information. That is what we realized in this process. So this type of activities, I think more long term engagement is required to educate citizens, so that if citizens start saying that we don't want flyovers, we want streets which are more pedestrian friendly, more bicycle friendly, we want better public transport system, we don't want these high rise buildings with crores of rupees of worth of apartment houses which are just lying vacant and adding to the urban heat island effect. We want a different kind of a building principles to be used, and so on and so forth. So if people start demanding that, then the change will happen at the administration level also.
Okay. Ma'am, for young change makers who are listening today, what would you say is the best place to begin if they want to engage in climate action or cool down their own city?
So first and foremost, I think it's important to have a sound scientific understanding of what are the causes and effects of climate change. Unfortunately, there is a lot of misinformation floating around. So that is one area where science-based climate change education is very, very critically important. More often than not, environmental issues are discussed from a emotional perspective rather than the factual and scientific perspective. So somehow we have to get out of that trap. Once you develop a proper understanding of what is causing climate change and what are its consequences for wherever, whichever location you are living and operating in, then you also start seeing the path forward as to how do we solve this problem. So there are ways and there are actions that you can take in your own personal life, but unfortunately now the climate crisis has advanced to such a stage where just people changing their lifestyle is not going to be enough. We need systemic changes. We need fundamental changes in the way we visualize our ideal urban landscapes. We need fundamental change in the way urban administrations operate. So I think that young citizens should not only adopt low carbon lifestyle choices, but they also have to become active citizens and start demanding changes in the administrative systems at the city level. And that is going to require a lot of time investment, a lot of sort of thoughtful steps have to be taken. You can start by creating a dialogue with your local political representatives, for example, or local bureaucrats, because they are also clueless. Their understanding of urban sustainability is also not based on science. So these conversations need to happen. There are, fortunately, we are a democratic country, so there are ways and means by which we can convey our asks to the administration. And but if push comes to shove, and as I said in the beginning, it's the money which is driving urban planning choices. So at some point, we will also have to be ready to protest and come on the streets in large numbers and demand change. So all of these things we'll have to do, whether young or old, but young people have more invested in this because you will have to live through the climate change impacts more than older people.
So what you have said right now, that is requiring a sort of massive change. So what are some tiny or everyday actions that we can do to sort of combat heat islands and climate change?
So, as far as combating heat island is concerned, there are two ways of looking at it. One is that the infrastructure that is already there, we can't do much about it. I mean, you can't go around demanding that people demolish buildings. So, in that case, what can we do to ease the lives of people who have to be out there on the streets? That is something that we can think about. Uh, but in a more from a more long term perspective, if we don't want to keep on adding to this problem, then introspect on our daily activities. Try to adopt those pathways which are creating the least greenhouse gas emission. Like for example, you have to go to a nearby shop, then choose to walk rather than take your vehicle. Do you really need to change your electronic devices every 3 years, or can you wait for 5 years or 8 years? These are the kind of thought processes. Also, I mean, any other shopping related decisions, you really have to think about whether you really need to do this right now. So these sort of changes in our internal decision making processes will also go a long way.
All right. And looking ahead, how do you envision a truly climate resilient Indian city? And what is one radical shift that you think we must make?
So, again, going back to SDG 11, I think that provides a pretty good template for a sustainable as well as a climate resilient city. So, I think, I mean, India as a country has signed on the SDG framework, which means that we have committed to implement all the sustainable development goals. So we have that's what I was saying, that we already have the policies in place. It's just a matter of implementing those. But if we implement what SDG 11 is recommending, we will see sustainable and climate resilient cities. But where to find the political will to do that is a question I really don't have an answer to. So that's, but I don't see any other way forward. That has to be the big change, that somewhere the key decision makers have to rise above the financial greed and do something which is actually good for the city.
And lastly, what's giving you hope right now despite all the climate challenges that we are facing?
What is giving me hope is that I'm talking with you, and I mean, yeah, if young people are engaging with these topics and wanting to have these conversations and are thinking about how to make the world better, then we are in a very, very hopeful situation, I feel.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much.